it's kind of classic projection, right? The very things he's talking about, virtue, strength, security, family, those are all things that Trump's Republican Party has completely abandoned making any claim to. I mean, virtue, really? In a party led by Donald Trump with the affairs and the porn stars and everything else that's associated with that guy? Security? When we're talking about a party led by somebody who has been rolled repeatedly by figures like Putin and Xi Jinping, and family. My goodness. And this is what I think it really comes down to, is a lot of people at home are thinking about their families. I know I'm thinking about our family and how our family, my husband and the son and daughter that we're raising, are going to be so much better off if Kamala Harris gets elected, if Democrats win. Why? Because those policies are going to support our family. Look, they long ago sacrificed their claim to be the party of family, not just in terms of the, disturbing opposite of family values that leaders like Donald Trump showed, but also as they've emerged being against IVF, against the Affordable Care Act that means so much to so many families, talking about abolishing the Department of Education. They long ago walked away from any serious claim on being the party of family. And what you're seeing in those kinds of just Fox News freakouts, I think, is an inability to talk about this election in terms of what it's going to mean for our lives.
That was Pete Buttigieg, as always, with a brilliant takedown of MAGA hypocrisy. And he was responding to a clip of Fox News, specifically calling out Jesse Waters and the freak out that is happening at the Fox propaganda network. And really all of MAGA, as they see Vice President Kamala Harris surging in the polls. We talk about it on this show so much. She is surging in the polls. She is having historic fundraising numbers. And it's not just that she is winning over Democrats or winning back Democrats, winning over independents. She's also taking Trump voters. Yes, Republicans are starting to move over to Kamala Harris because her message is really resonating. And the stark contrast between her and Donald Trump really points out the hypocrisy of the MAGA movement. And it's not just that, it's also the ridiculous and unhinged tirades Donald Trump has gone on lately, and his speech is just so strange and frankly weird, a word I'm hearing Democrats use a lot more, and I'm glad to hear. But one of those strange comments that Donald Trump has made was called out by Pete Buttigieg later in this interview that he did, and I want to check that out.
But even in a friendly interview, I mean, I think it was Laura Ingraham on Fox, gave him a chance to clear up that comment that he made to religious right audience when he said that if you vote for me, you'll never have to vote again. And, still didn't take the opportunity to reassure people. If anything, the subtext of what he was saying was, could be charitably interpreted as him saying that when he said you won't have to vote for me ever again, don't worry, it's not that I'll get rid of elections, it's just that I'll have Christian nationalism so hardwired into this country's government that you won't have to bother voting for me in 4 years. That was his idea of cleaning that up, I guess. So, whether it's a skeptical interview or a friendly interview, he's just getting further and further spinning out, flailing. And I think that
it's the comments from Donald Trump when he says, you won't have to vote in 4 years, or I'll be a dictator on day one, which are the few exceptions when we should believe Donald Trump. Every other instance in which Donald Trump speaks, he is lying, except for the ones when he tells the damning and damaging truth about himself, which is he is a want-to-be dictator. He wants to be an authoritarian. He wants to undermine and take down our democracy. And so in those moments, we have to listen to him. And, those moments of truth where Donald Trump accidentally slips up and says what we all know to be true and what is true of him is, I think, one of the main reasons why he's so afraid to debate Kamala Harris. And Pete Buttigieg called Donald Trump out just for that in this clip.
So, whether it's a skeptical interview or a friendly interview, he's just getting further and further spinning out, flailing. And I think that's exactly why he backed out of this debate. And let's not allow them to distort what happened. Not only did he say any time, any place, he also said a specific time and place, which was the date that he agreed to on the network that he agreed to in this ABC debate. And neither that date nor that network were changed, but suddenly he had a problem with it the moment he realized the person he would be facing is Kamala Harris, because, of course, he was afraid to face Kamala Harris in a debate.
I talked about Donald Trump being so afraid to possibly slip up on national television with tens of millions watching. And that's why he's so scared to debate Kamala Harris, that he might accidentally say something that would be so devastating to him, as he's done in most of his speeches lately. But it's also certainly because he knows how bad his record is. He knows not only how bad his record is, but how bad his policy proposals are for a second term, which, of course, we're not going to let him win, and Kamala Harris won't because we're voting blue in November. But Pete Buttigieg talked about that unpopular policy that Donald Trump is pushing in this clip right here.
Well, I say this with deep humility, having borne witness to the Palin candidacy. But do you think that they meant to pick J.D. Vance? And by that I mean, do you think they knew that he's the human embodiment of the 900 pages of Project 2025?
Well, you know, it's a great point. Project 2025 is wildly unpopular, so much so that I'm pretty sure it's the first time in modern history that a presidential candidate has had to disavow his own policy framework. And let's be clear, that's what this is, right? Just because they dissociate with the guy who wrote it up and try to get a different brand name doesn't change the fact that before it occurred to anybody to write it down and call it Project 2025, this was already their governing agenda because it's part of the playbook they followed when they were in charge. And therefore, it will unquestionably be their governing agenda again, should he get reelected. The problem isn't this document called Project 2025, although, you know, it has embarrassed them, and it's that much more so because J.D. Vance literally wrote the foreword to the book edition of it, so they can't disavow it convincingly. But the problem isn't this thing called Project 2025. The problem is the governing agenda itself. Project 2025 is just the footnotes on what they're planning to do, which is wildly unpopular with the American people because it's full of crazy ideas that don't make any sense.
Donald Trump can try to escape his attachment to Project 2025. He can pretend that he has nothing to do with it or he knows nothing about it. And, you know, the head of the Heritage Foundation who wrote Project 2025 essentially was let go the other day. He moved on from that position. And it's funny because the Trump campaign issued a memo about this saying, oh, the head of Project 2025 or the head of the Heritage Foundation who wrote Project 2025, he's no longer in that position. And so clearly there's no connection between the Trump campaign and Project 2025. But then in the same memo, they went on to say, and let this be a note to anyone who tries to threaten our campaign. You know, if you put forth bad policy, we're going to get you out. So they just admitted that the guy who wrote Project 2025 wrote it for Trump. They can't escape it. It is so ingrained in the Trump campaign and what they want to do if Donald Trump would be reelected. And he always says this funny thing, which is, you know, oh, I don't like Project 2025. I've never read it, but there are some good things in there. It's just he can't help but tell on himself all of the time. And the biggest example of him telling on himself with his connection to Project 2025 was his vice presidential pick, J.D. Vance, who loves the content. He loves the policy in Project 2025. And Pete Buttigieg had this to say about J.D. Vance.
Caught up on this latest appearance by Donald Trump, but one of the things I saw was he was asked about J.D. Vance, and if I understand right, his answer was basically to say, oh, well, it doesn't matter that much to the outcome of the campaign, who you pick for VP, which means it did not occur to him to even pretend to be interested in the impact of the vice presidential choice on the country. It's one of the most serious, in fact, the most serious choice that a candidate makes as a candidate, because it's the one thing that goes into effect for the entire country automatically if that candidate gets elected. And yet, as somebody who's just incapable of thinking or caring about the rest of the country and about how elections affect our lives, I think it's very telling that when he got a question about the embarrassments that have been caused by his own choice for running mate and VP in J.D. Vance, he didn't even try to defend what kind of vice president he would be for the country or whether he would be ready on day one. Instead, just talked about it completely in terms of politics. Of course, the politics of this aren't that great for him either.
J.D. Vance has gotten Donald Trump in a lot of trouble, which is kind of amazing to think about how someone could be so unpopular that they could make Donald Trump more unpopular. That's kind of historic from J.D. Vance. And we've talked about on this show how historically unpopular he is, but he almost has a gift, a knack, a talent for being terrible. J.D. Vance does. And so it's funny to me that Donald Trump thinks he can pretend that not only does his policy not matter, him pushing Project 2025, he can just pretend that, oh, I have nothing to do with that, and no one will connect it to him. But he can also pretend that his horrible vice president has nothing to do with him. You know, he's tried to get rid of a vice president before. I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't try to get rid of his running mate in J.D. Vance. There's been a lot of chatter in MAGA world about potentially dumping J.D. Vance and replacing him with someone else, which would just be so funny for Donald Trump to have to admit his faults for the first time in his life, maybe take accountability. I really don't know what Republican they'd replace him with. I don't know if you could find a Republican who also isn't terrible, who'd be willing to work alongside Donald Trump on this campaign and then eventually suffer a devastating defeat in November. But maybe they'll find one who's willing to grovel. I'm sure Tim Scott would be willing to do the job. But it's funny that Donald Trump thinks he can separate himself from all the uncomfortable aspects of who he is in an attempt to win this race. But we see right through that. We see right through the MAGA hypocrisy. We see through Donald Trump's lies. And we know that he's going to lose in November. And this movement is about calling out those lies. And so if you want to be a part of this movement, be a part of this channel, make sure that you hit that subscribe button. You join what we are building here in just under a month, less than 1 month. We've already grown this channel to more than 100,000 subscribers. And that is because of you. And it really means the world to me. I am so glad that we are in this fight together. And I am so grateful for what we're going to be doing going forward. And if you have enjoyed this channel, make sure to leave a like on this video. It really goes a long way in supporting what we're doing. And it would mean a lot to me. And until next time, I'll see you soon.